7 people have now lost their lives. 117,000 homes are still without power. And as of this morning, neither disaster is finished. The United States spent over this past weekend fighting 2 completely separate water disasters at the exact same time, 4,000 meters apart from each other. And most people watching the news only heard about one of them. This video is going to give you the full picture of both. By the time you finish watching, you will understand exactly what happened, exactly why the situation was so dangerous, and exactly why the people in charge of keeping Americans safe are still not done, because both of these events are still actively unfolding at this moment. On August 11, 2026, a system of severe storms began spreading across the state of Indiana. What followed over the next 4 days was far more than an ordinary flood. It was a record-shattering, infrastructure-breaking, and historically significant deluge that redrew the map of what is physically possible in a Midwestern summer. The National Weather Service reported that some areas of Indiana received more than 11 inches of rain in a window of just a couple of days. The single highest location total came out of Newcastle, Indiana, where the rain gauge recorded 11.43 inches. Greensburg took more than 7 inches. Those numbers alone are serious. But raw rainfall totals do not tell you the full story. But the full story is really about what happens when that rain falls on ground that is already completely saturated. Indiana had absorbed repeated rounds of heavy storms in the days leading up to August 11th. The soil was not merely damp, it was already completely full. There was essentially nowhere left for that water to go. And this is the single most important physical idea to understand in understanding what happened next. When ground is saturated, the percentage of every additional inch of rainfall that actually soaks into the soil collapses close to zero, and the percentage that runs off directly into the nearest river or stream climbs toward 100%. So when those 11 in fell on Indiana between August 11th and 13th, they did not behave like 11 in of rain. They effectively behaved like 11 inches of water being poured directly into the river, every single drop straight into the channel with nowhere else to go. The White River took all of it. Flooding concentrated along the main stem of the White River running from Hamilton County down into the northern suburbs of Indianapolis. Multiple river systems across the state went under flood warning simultaneously. Drone footage captured by NBC News showed floodwaters swallowing entire streets in the Ravenswood neighborhood of Indianapolis, submerging cars up to their roofs, rising to the front doors of homes, while residents navigated their own neighborhoods in kayaks and rowboats. That distinction matters because the numbers alone can make the event sound less serious than it actually was. That is not simply a flood. That is an inland sea appearing overnight inside a major American city. And then the White River did something that nobody alive had ever seen it do before. At the Anderson Gauge Station, the White River crested on Friday at 24.93 feet. The previous all-time record at Anderson was 23.66 feet. That record had stood since 1913, 113 years, 2 world wars, the Great Depression, the interstate highway system being built, the moon landing, every flood that came through Indiana in all that time, and none of them touched that number until Friday, August 14th, 2026. Friday's crest beat the 1913 record by 1.33 feet, and upstream at Noblesville, about 15 miles north of Indianapolis, the river also broke its own 1913 record, running to a forecast crest of 24.5 feet against the old record of 23.8. Now here is the part that makes this genuinely extraordinary, and not just as a headline number. The 1913 flood, the one that held that record for over a century, was not a summer event. The Great Flood of 1913 was a spring flood. It ran on a combination of snowmelt and heavy rain. In late March, a massive storm system brought 6 to 11 in of rain across Indiana, Ohio, and parts of Pennsylvania and Kentucky on top of a snowpack that was already melting into ground that was still partially frozen in places. That is an enormous hydrological load, snow melting into frozen ground that cannot absorb it, plus heavy rain on top. That event killed an estimated 100 to 200 people in Indiana alone, left more than 250,000 people across the Midwest homeless, and became the second deadliest flood in United States history. It set the benchmark. It became the measurement against which every subsequent Indiana flood was judged for over a century. The August 2026 flood beat it with rainfall alone. No snowpack, no frozen ground, no spring melt already sitting in the channel before the rain started. August in Indiana is supposed to be the season when a river has the most capacity to absorb a shock. Summer, warm ground, no snowmelt. The 1913 record was set with every single hydrological advantage stacked in its favor. Every factor that could make a flood worse was present in 1913, and a summer thunderstorm sequence just walked past it. That detail is the one that should stop you cold because it means the infrastructure, the flood maps, the insurance rate calculations, the height of levees, the design of drainage systems, the location of roads that go underwater in a flood. All of it was built around a number from 1913. And on Friday, that number stopped being the ceiling. The meteorology behind what caused this is also important to understand because it is not exotic. It is not a once-in-a-lifetime atmospheric setup. It is a stall, a frontal boundary set up across the Midwest, and then stopped advancing. Hot, humid air pressing northward from the Gulf of Mexico and cooler air holding to the north of the boundary essentially balanced each other out, and the front parked. At the same time, a high-pressure system sitting over the Gulf acted like a moisture conveyor belt, pumping warm, water-loaded air northward straight into that stationary boundary. In practical terms, that meant the danger was building long before many people could see the full extent of it. Every disturbance rolling along the jet stream then fired a fresh round of thunderstorm cells along the front, and because those cells tracked perpendicular to the boundary, they crossed the same counties again and again and again. Meteorologists call this training. The image is exactly what it sounds like. Storm cells running down the same track like cars on a train. Each one dumps its full load of rain on exactly the same patch of ground the previous cell just soaked. A single thunderstorm that crosses a county in 40 minutes leaves behind a manageable amount of water. The same storm regenerating over the same county for 2 straight days leaves behind a catastrophe. And the intensity of any individual storm cell never has to be unusual for this to happen. Only the geometry has to be wrong. And the geometry is set entirely by whether the boundary is moving. The 1913 Great Flood had the same failure mode, a storm system that stalled. 113 years apart, Indiana was hit by the exact same atmospheric mechanism. Now let us talk about the people caught in the middle of this. At least 7 people have died in flooding and storms across Indiana as of the latest confirmed count. That number was 5 on Friday, moved to 6 by Saturday, and was revised to 7 by Sunday. It should still be treated as a live figure. Among the victims was an 18-year-old named Matthew, my incoming freshman at Purdue University. He and 3 friends entered the Mississauga River on Wednesday when the flooding was beginning. His body was recovered by the Delaware County Sheriff's Office 2 days later. A 4-year-old boy in Jennings County was killed when a tree crashed through the roof of his home during strong winds. A 58-year-old woman in Lake County, an 86-year-old woman in Porter County, a 32-year-old man in Lake County, a 31-year-old man in Henry County, 7 people, ordinary people in ordinary Indiana towns, killed by water and wind that nobody predicted would be this severe. The Indianapolis Fire Department alone pulled 95 people and 45 pets out of floodwaters by late Saturday afternoon. Just one city's fire department in a single afternoon. Responders ran rescues and welfare checks in Fayette County. A senior mobile home community in Tipton County was fully evacuated. National Guard soldiers worked alongside local first responders in high water recovery operations in Indianapolis. Hamilton County officials reported historic flooding across the county. The Hamilton County Board of Commissioners president said Sunday morning, and these were her exact words, "It is a good morning because it is not raining and the water is receding. That is the bar, not raining and water going down. That is what counts as a good morning after a week like this." The governor of Indiana declared a statewide disaster emergency and requested federal aid. President Trump approved an emergency declaration for the state, and FEMA confirmed that federal disaster assistance was available. But here is a distinction that matters enormously. An emergency declaration and a major disaster declaration are not the same thing. An emergency declaration is the faster, smaller instrument. It frees up to $5 million in federal resources, and it is designed for immediate response. Moving people, moving equipment, keeping the operation running while the water is still up, $5 million is a response budget. It is not a recovery budget, and it is certainly not a rebuilding budget for a river corridor that just set a 113-year crest record through the second largest metropolitan area in Indiana. The sequence of events is what turned an already dangerous situation into something much larger. The larger instrument is a major disaster declaration. That is what unlocks individual assistance for households whose homes were destroyed and public assistance for repairing infrastructure. Getting there requires joint preliminary damage assessments in all the affected counties, and those assessments were still being completed as of Monday. Until those numbers come back, $5 million is what is on the table. And $5 million against a flood that just rewrote the historical record is not enough. And the flooding threat did not stay confined to Indiana. By Sunday night and into Monday, heavy rains spread the problem eastward. Flooding hit communities in Ohio, with firefighters in Perry County alone making more than 50 water rescues on Saturday night and into Sunday morning. A woman was found stranded on top of her car in floodwaters in Thorne Township. The flooding threat extended into West Virginia and Kentucky. What started as an Indiana story became a regional story. A Midwest water crisis spreading east with the weather system. Now, roughly 4,000 miles west, a different disaster was unfolding with a completely different cause. Yet the result was remarkably similar. Hurricane Lala strengthened from a tropical storm into a Category 1 hurricane on Saturday, August 15, 2026, as it approached Hawaii's Big Island with maximum sustained winds of 75 miles per hour. The National Hurricane Center used the phrase life-threatening conditions before the storm's closest approach. Lala never made an official landfall. Its eye passed the southern tip of the Big Island without crossing the coastline. Forecasters had noted before the event that a direct strike would have been Hawaii's first hurricane landfall in more than 30 years. It did not happen. There is no landfall point on the record. LA officially grazed, not struck, and it still swept occupied homes completely off their foundations. Rain in the heaviest bands fell at rates of 3 to 5 inches per hour, not 3 to 5 inches total for a day, 3 to 5 inches per hour. One day total surpassed 2 feet of rain in some locations. The Big Island's mountains received more than 3.5 feet of rainfall, more than 42 inches. Maui's mountainous areas saw up to 2 feet, and forecasters revised the maximum storm total forecast upward from 25 inches to 30 to 35 inches as the storm slowed down over the islands. When a storm slows, the rain piles in the same location. The same physics that stalled the front over Indiana, the same principle of sustained rate over fixed location played out in Hawaii in the form of a tropical cyclone that reduced its forward speed at exactly the wrong moment. Hawaii County Mayor Kimo Alama said publicly that several occupied homes may have been swept off their foundations in the Nalahu and Wohohinu areas. He described a river of water going through the Nalahu area, washing away quite a lot. Hawaii County Civil Defense launched a joint search and rescue operation using county resources, the Hawaii National Guard, and the United States Coast Guard to reach people who had called 911 for help, but could not be reached because flooding and boulders blocked the roads. Search and rescue operations, in the dark, in rushing water, with boulders on the roads, trying to reach people who had called for help and then gone silent because the cell towers went down, and that is where the real significance of this event begins to emerge. One person was killed in a storm-related vehicle crash on the Big Island. Over 100 homes were damaged or destroyed on Hawaii Island alone. 6 bridges were destroyed or nearly destroyed in the Kau area. Hawaii's Governor Josh Green described the scene as utter devastation in parts of the South. A section of Bajala Highway collapsed overnight into Sunday, cutting off critical access to an area where one of the region's only hospitals is located. The collapse created a new waterfall where a road used to be. Hawaiian Airlines canceled 52 flights. Around 190 total flights across the state were canceled or delayed on Saturday alone. All state offices, county offices, schools, courts, and judiciary offices were closed Monday. And the power situation is where the full weight of island geography becomes impossible to ignore. By Saturday night, over 88,000 Hawaiian Electric customers were without power. By Sunday morning, that figure had climbed to over 178,000. By Monday morning, approximately 117,000 customers remained in the dark across 3 islands, with 41,000 on Hawaii Island alone, mostly in Puna, North and South Kona, North and South Kahala, Hamakua, and South Hilo. The utility warned that some outages may last months, not days. Here's why the word months is not an exaggeration at all. Hawaii's islands are not grid interconnected. They are not connected to each other, and they are not connected to any mainland network. When a storm hits the continental United States and takes out transmission lines, utilities can call for mutual aid and convoys of repair trucks arrive overnight from neighboring states. That system is how major continental outages get fixed in days. It does not exist for Hawaii. There's no road from the mainland to Hawaii. Every repair crew, every replacement pole, every transformer, every spool of transmission line is either already on that island or it has to arrive by ship or by plane. Hawaiian Electric requested personnel from partner electric utilities on the mainland, and approximately 100 crew members were anticipated to arrive by Tuesday to begin work Wednesday. They had to be flown in. 2 of Hawaii Island's largest independent power producers, Puna Geothermal Venture and Hamakua Energy Partners, were disconnected from the grid because of storm damage. Wind energy providers were also offline. A 42-mile span of transmission line on the Hamakua coast required assessment after falling trees took down multiple poles and structures across a corridor. That is not a scattered outage. That is a backbone failure. And on an island, a backbone failure does not get fixed by the utility 2 states over lending you their trucks. The timing made the situation even more difficult for residents and emergency crews. The second-order effects of an extended island power outage compound rapidly. An outage takes down water systems that depend on electric pumping. The Department of Water Supply issued an essential needs-only notice for all customers, limiting water use to drinking, cooking, and personal hygiene only. An extended outage takes down refrigeration for food. It takes down refrigeration for medication, including insulin and other drugs that cannot tolerate heat. It takes down the cell towers that people use to call 911 when they are trapped, and the same towers emergency managers use to find them and coordinate rescues. Generators cover some of this for a while, then they run out of fuel, and fuel also arrives by ship. None of this is unique to Hawaii in kind. Every island faces this challenge. It is only unique in degree because in Hawaii there is simply no road out. Governor Green estimated the storm caused hundreds of millions of dollars in damage statewide. That estimate was made on Sunday while damage assessments by helicopter and drone were still being completed on Hawaii Island and Oahu. The actual number will be higher. It always is. Now, look at both events happening in the same week. What connects them? And what does that actually mean? These two disasters have nothing to do with each other meteorologically. There's no shared storm system, no common atmospheric front, no single weather pattern linking the Midwest to the Central Pacific. One is a stalled frontal boundary, the other is a tropical cyclone. They are completely separate. Anyone telling you otherwise is selling something, but they did their damage in exactly the same way. Neither one was primarily a wind story. Both were water volume stories. And both of them broke through benchmarks and records that local infrastructure had been built around in Indiana's case for more than a century. There's also a deeply important story here about how warning systems work and where they fail, and why accurate forecasts do not automatically produce safe outcomes. The National Weather Service in Indianapolis had upgraded the White River outlook from moderate to major flood severity days before the crest arrived, with flood warnings written to expire out to August 17th. Forecasters published in advance in clear language that the worst had not yet arrived. The National Hurricane Center used the words life-threatening before LA's closest approach to Hawaii. Hawaiian Electric warned customers before the storm about possible extended outages. In both cases, the forecast was correct. The science worked, and the warning was issued, and people still died, homes were still destroyed, and 100,000 people are still sitting in the dark. What happened next was the direct consequence of that combination. The gap between an accurate forecast and a safe outcome is therefore not simply a forecasting problem. It is an infrastructure problem. It is a flood map problem. It is a problem of where people are allowed to build and on what terms. It is a problem of mobile home communities located in floodplains with no elevation margin and residents with no vehicle to evacuate. It is a problem of Category 1 hurricane ratings that measure sustained wind and tell you almost nothing useful about a rain rate of 5 inches per hour landing on steep volcanic slopes above a coastal town. It is a problem of a public that hears Category 1 and decides it is survivable because Category 1 is the lowest rung on the scale, and survivable is a reasonable interpretation of the lowest rung right up until 5 in of rain per hour start running down a mountain into your neighborhood. The Saffir-Simpson scale measures one thing: sustained wind. Category 1 is 74 to 95 miles per hour. That is what the number tells you. It told you almost nothing useful about the hazard that actually killed someone and destroyed houses in Hawaii, which was extraordinary rainfall on steep volcanic terrain that forces moist air upward and wrings it out, producing rainfall rates far above what the same storm would generate over flat ground or open water. A Category 1 that never made landfall did this. The category was not wrong. It was measuring the wrong thing. And in Indiana, a severe thunderstorm warning is one of the most routine alerts in the American Midwest. People who have lived there their whole lives have heard that alert hundreds of times. A stalled line of routine thunderstorms just took down the most famous flood record in the state's history. In both cases, the public-facing warning communicated something close to the inverse of the actual threat level. There is one more thing worth stating clearly before we get to where things stand right now. A 100-year flood does not mean a flood that happens once per century. That is a common and dangerous misunderstanding. A 100-year flood means a flood with a 1% chance of being equaled or exceeded in any given year. 2 of them can happen in consecutive years without anything being statistically wrong, but that 1% figure is calculated from the historical gauge record, and that calculation assumes that the past is a valid sample of the future. Every floodplain map, every levee height, every culvert diameter, every flood insurance rate map in Indiana, and a large portion of local building codes sit downstream of that assumption. When a record that stood for 113 years falls to a mechanism that did not even set the original record, rainfall alone, beating rainfall plus snowmelt. That detail is easy to overlook, but it explains much of what followed. The assumption itself is what is being tested. So where do things stand right now today, August 18, 2026? In Indiana, floodwaters along the White River are receding, but the damage assessment is just beginning. Officials in Hamilton County said Sunday morning the water was finally starting to go back, but recovery along the White River corridor is still active. The death toll stands at 7 confirmed, and it may still move as water continues to recede and recovery operations continue. The joint preliminary damage assessments that determine whether Indiana gets upgraded from an emergency declaration to a major disaster declaration are underway. Those assessments are the next concrete milestone to watch until they come back with a dollar figure. $5 million is the federal number on the table against a flood that just broke a 113-year record through the second largest metropolitan corridor in the state. The flooding threat has spread east. Ohio communities were hit Sunday night. The system is not done moving. In Hawaii, 117,000 customers remain without power as of Monday morning, 11 hours ago. Crews repaired 3 major transmission lines on Sunday, which is one of the first steps to rebuilding the backbone of the grid. 100 mainland crew members are expected to arrive Tuesday to begin work Wednesday. Damage assessments by helicopter and drone continue on Hawaii Island and Oahu. Over 100 homes damaged or destroyed, 6 bridges destroyed or near destroyed in the Kau area. The Pajala Highway collapse continues to cut off access to a hospital. All schools and government offices are closed Monday. The governor's damage estimate is hundreds of millions of dollars. That number will rise. Hawaii's last hurricane landfall was Hurricane Aniki on September 11, 1992. A Category 4 storm that struck Kauai, killed 7 people, and caused approximately $3.1 billion in damage in 1992. That was 33 years and 11 months ago. Most residents of the Big Island have never lived through a hurricane. Preparedness decays across a gap that long, and LA tested it without even coming ashore. Both disasters are still unfolding right now. Both recovery timelines are measured in weeks, not days. Both events broke through numbers that were supposed to hold. The levees of assumption, the flood maps, the historical records, the category scales, and what people read into them. And in both places, the people who live there are now waking up to a world where the old numbers do not apply anymore, where the benchmark is gone, where what they built their lives around, the assumption of where the water would stop, turned out to be wrong. The United States fought 2 simultaneous federal-scale disasters this weekend. 7 dead in Indiana, 1 dead in Hawaii, 100,000 still without power, dozens of homes gone, an 18-year-old who should have been starting college in weeks, a 4-year-old who never got to grow up, a grandfather assessing the water line on his walls on his 37th birthday, a county commissioner for whom a good morning simply means it is not raining. Neither of these stories is over. The water is going down in Indiana, and the power is slowly coming back on in Hawaii, but the reckoning is just beginning. The damage assessments, the insurance fights, the questions about flood maps and building codes and what gets rebuilt where and on what terms, those conversations will take years. The infrastructure decisions that follow from this week's events will take decades, and the numbers that just got broken will either be written into the new maps, the new floodplains, the new design standards, or they will be ignored. For the people on the ground, these were not abstract measurements. They were immediate physical dangers. And in 30 or 50 or 70 years, someone will stand in front of a camera and tell you that another record just fell. A record that dates back to 2026, the year 2 disasters hit America at once. We will keep tracking this. The damage assessments, the recovery totals, the death toll if it moves, the power restoration timeline in Hawaii, the question of whether Indiana's emergency declaration gets upgraded, all of it. Stay with this channel because this story is not finished.